Hi, it's Kyle from Bitewing Games, and today we're taking a look at The Shores of Tripoli. The Shores of Tripoli is a game for 1 to 2 players that plays in about 45 to 60 minutes. This is a historical-based game. You'll either play a part of Tripoli, attempting to pirate raid and to loot from American ships, or you'll play as the U.S., trying to form a peace treaty and quell any Tripolitan uprisings. The game is played over a series of rounds, or years. Each round has 4 seasons. Quite intuitive. Each player will be given a hand of cards from their respective deck, US or Tripoli. Players will go back and forth taking actions as directed by the cards that they lay. The season and year marker progressing each round after the players have taken their turn. Each player has 2 ways to win. Tripoli will either try to pirate raid all of the gold or sink a certain number of American ships. The US will either try to form a peace treaty or have an assault on Tripoli and just take over. The actions include things like move ships, go on pirate raids to try to steal gold, attack other players. You can attack ship to ship, ship to land, or land to land, all outlined in detail in the rulebook. Let's take a look at a few examples to get a little grasp of the game. America plays Corsairs Confiscated to destroy a few ships belonging to Tripoli. Tripoli plays Morocco Declares War to add 3 ships to an ally port. America plays Naval Movement to move ships to that region. Tripoli plays Moroccan Corsairs Raid to go on a pirate raid. At this point, the US ships have a chance to intercept, aka destroy, the ships that are going on a pirate raid. They will roll 2 dice per ship. Any 6s lead to a sunk ship. All remaining Tripolitan ships then pirate raid. If they roll a 5 or a 6, they have successfully raided and they earn a gold. 12 gold and they win. The game is mostly a card game, taking actions throughout the game. You will resolve any combats or any interactions with the players by rolling the dice, so there definitely is some luck involved there. We'll talk about that more in the pros and cons. And that's basically the game. A few more details and then we'll move on to final thoughts. Each card has a specific action that it lets you take. Once that action is taken, generally the card will be trashed and no longer used in the game. However, some of the cards, like Treaty of Peace, has a requirement that it must be the fall of 1805 or later to play that card. That card may seem useless, but you can discard any card at any point and it will later be reshuffled into the deck. When you discard a card, you can take a more generic action. For the US, that may mean moving a ship. For Tripoli, that may mean going on a pirate raid. There's a few generic actions that each player can take with these cards that they discard. So there's a little bit of a balance of when do you use a card for its action versus when do you discard it so that you'll see the card again later when it's more advantageous. So, is Shores of Tripoli fun? Today we're doing a special edition with my brother Quinn. So we're going to do things a little bit differently today. We're going to just more discuss a topic or point of the game and then kind of put that into a pros or cons category and go from there. So, Shores of Tripoli, Quinn, what do you think of the appearance/theme of the game?
I think the theme's really fun. Especially if you're into history, the historical aspect does make it fun, trying to figure out that balance of, do I want to be that pirate raiding and try to get the gold, or do I want to come in and try to make that peace treaty that the U.S. side has to it? So I think the historical side is really fun.
I'm not a huge... I hate to say, I'm not a big fan of history, but I'm kind of not a huge fan of history. Any, historical fiction, historical things, don't as much do it for me.
Sure.
Like dinosaurs and sci-fi a little bit more for me. So, the theme was okay. I don't mind it. For me personally, I'm not a big history person, so it didn't do it for me. But as far as the overall look of the game, I thought it was pretty. The board's a little bland, but it's a map, so I don't know what you can really do about that. Mm-hmm. The boats I think are pretty enough. They're cool little mini boats, and I thought they looked really nice.
Yeah, I do like the boat miniatures a lot. I think that's fun. The map isn't the prettiest map. Yeah, it is just historical as far as how the shape of the land looks and the water and land.
As far as historical accuracy, can't really speak to that since I'm not a big history buff.
Nope.
Length and weight of the game, what are your thoughts?
The first time playing through it did feel a little bit long, but playing through a second, third, fourth time, it did feel a lot faster once I knew what the cards did. I thought the length of the game was pretty good, but it can drag on if you don't know what you're doing. So definitely try to keep that game moving so it does get through. And the complexity, it did seem a little bit much at first, but again, the cards explain fairly thoroughly what they can do. So once you get used to reading through those cards and knowing what you're doing, it's not too bad.
Yeah, I think it definitely has a steeper learning curve. It's not one that I would show to a ton of new players.
Yeah.
It's not like I want to teach someone new every weekend. I would rather play this game, and that's what we did. We played, 3 or 4 times together?
Right.
And that's how I would play the game, is find someone that you're going to play with and play it a few times rather than trying to teach it to someone new, because there is something to be said about having played it once or twice, learning what the cards are, learning what the possibilities are, and having that. So I think playing it multiple times is definitely beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like how long it was and the way it was pretty good. It didn't feel like it ended too quickly, but it also didn't feel like it overstayed its welcome. And I wasn't like, oh my gosh, is this game ever going to end? It just felt like, oh, like this seems like a good length of game for what it is.
Yeah, and it does have some variety to the length of that game, depending on how fast those pirate raids can go to get the gold versus how fast the U.S. can come in and kind of take away those boats and ships and make that peace treaty option.
That's true. I think there's one game we won I shouldn't say we won. One of us won in 30 minutes because we got all the gold, and another game we took it all the way until someone conquered Tripoli, and that takes closer to an hour versus 30 minutes. So a little bit of variation there for sure. As far as the actual gameplay, especially concerning the cards and the actions and things, what are your thoughts on the game?
The cards are fun. They have some nice pictures. Again, a little bit confusing to understand right at first, but I do think the cards have a nice balance to counter each other. The U.S. comes in and Tripoli has a way to counter, and the Tripolians go out to attack, and the U.S. has a way to counter. So I do think there was a nice balance there. One of the things that helped us moving on a little later was knowing what each other's counters were, so we could understand when to use our cards, when to hold, when to discard those.
Yeah, that again, the first game, or probably this was the first game or two we played, we're like, oh, I didn't know you had that card, and that totally changed things. But that being said, the last time we played, lost because you had a card I had totally forgotten about. So I think there is something about learning the game, but I do think the cards are pretty good. I like that you can discard the cards just generically, so you aren't stuck with a card that's like, oh, I can't use this card till later. It does me no good. Like, it can still be used for something. Mm-hmm. You're kind of balancing, do I use the card now for the action? Do I save it for later? You carry a certain number of cards over from round to round, so there is some strategy there. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I did feel a little bit stuck sometimes with what cards I had, I was like, you got really good cards to start off the game, so you could go on all these pirate raids and I couldn't really stop you. Or other times, as Tripoli, you get these things so you can go on a ton of pirate raids, but the U.S. can stop you almost immediately, and that's frustrating to me, where it's like, man, you had all the right cards to stop me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be frustrating depending on your card placement, and there is some strategy, like you said, to when you discard what you hold on to, what cards you keep as a secret, and it can be frustrating just depending on what you have. But one of the nice things, at least with the U.S., there is that second option of there are two ways to win with taking over Tripoli versus causing that peace treaty.
Yeah.
So there is some, again, variety there that if you don't have the right cards to go one way, you can kind of counterbalance and go a different way with it.
What do you think of the dice? So anytime you have a battle, and especially at the end of the game, if you're the U.S. trying to destroy or conquer Tripoli, there's quite a bit of dice rolling. How did you feel about the roll of the dice in the game? The roll of the dice, haha. The roll of the dice in the game and kind of the luck that introduces.
Man, this is where you get the highest peaks of the excitement of winning the battle and the lowest peaks of you played your cards just right, you got all the dice, and the roll just didn't go your way.
Yeah.
Really highs from getting a good victory, and really lows from playing it right, and the dice just didn't go your way.
Yeah, I agree. There are some moments. I feel like with the cards, the luck is a little bit frustrating, where it's like I just happen to not get the right card. And the dice, it's always frustrating when you roll the dice, but going into the battle, like, I'm rolling dice. Like, that's what I will be doing. And so I felt like just that understanding of, like, you didn't get any 6s to destroy a ship. But that's not unusual. Like, probability says you might not get any 6s. So I was more okay with that. The luck of the draw, honestly, to me, was more the luck that frustrated me than the luck of the roll.
Yeah, going in, like, this is a dice rolling game. Like, you got to know that, so you have those expectations.
All right, so as far as U.S. versus Tripoli, what did you think about the fairness of what role you were?
I think it's pretty balanced. I've played U.S. and Tripoli both a couple of times, and I do think there are advantages and disadvantages both ways. And it can seem like you get in a little bit of a rut if you do get behind. It can feel like you're just treading water trying to get back in the game. But there are some cards that let you to get that advantage back.
I feel like in playing a handful of times, I actually played by myself one time. I played as both characters just to test out the fairness. And I found that when you're Tripoli, I think it's pretty fair. I think they have fairly equal chances of winning. But playing as Tripoli, I feel like it's more possible to get like offended by the other player, where it's like, hey, I laid out ships here, and then US comes in and is like, I destroyed those ships. And so I feel like if you're going to play with someone and they're more likely to be offended, have them be the US, because that's a little more offensive to me, where Tripoli's more likely to be like, you always come and attack me, and US doesn't get attacked in quite the same way as Tripoli does.
Yeah.
But all in all, I feel like the game's pretty fair.
Yeah.
As far as any final pros or cons, I'll mention one that I have as a con. The rulebook. That was a wall, just a brick wall of text, and I had a really hard time getting through that, trying to read through the rulebook. And there was a YouTube video that actually helped explain lots of it. But still, man, looking through that, there's no pictures of the map, there's no examples, it's just text and text and text and text. Major thing for me was learning the game. It was really hard to get into the game just because of that. The other thing for me is the history emphasis. Again, in the rulebook mostly was, I just felt like the rulebook really was trying to emphasize the history, and it was good, but there was times where I was like, I just need to learn the basics of the gameplay rather than the history, and I felt like some of the terminology used in the rulebook was more emphasizing like, hey, like, to be correct, I'm saying this, and it's like, just make it easier. Say the orange ship instead of the Allies of Tripoli or something like that. Yeah, all in all, I thought it was a really fun game, a good two-player game. I haven't played it one player, so I can't speak to that. But I thought there was a lot of interesting choices to be made. Not one that I'm going to play every single time. It does take some learning, and I think it's one to play with the right person. But I think it's a very fun game if you don't mind getting a little competitive and trying to destroy someone else. All in all, I would give The Shores of Tripoli 3.5 stars. I think it's a very fun game, very enjoyable. It doesn't overstay its welcome. More difficult to learn, so it's a little bit less friendly as far as that goes. A few improvements I think could be made. I know he's looking at coming out with other historical games. Definitely the rulebook emphasis there. But all in all, pretty fun game. Go ahead and check it out. If you've played before, or if you have a favorite war game or a history game that you enjoy, let me know in the comments below. Until next time.